Hi, advanced freelancing listeners. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you tuning in. In 2021, I launched a second podcast, the Military Spouse Careers and Business Podcast. That show is designed to highlight the unique employment and business related challenges faced by America's military spouses. Sometimes, if I feel an episode is relevant, I'll bring it over here and cross post it on this show as well. Just know that you're listening to the right show, even if you hear references to military families, military spouses, DoD policy, or any of those specific things. I've chosen these episodes because I believe they have some relevant information that can even help freelancers navigate their own careers as entrepreneurs. Thanks again for tuning in. All right, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have my guest here today, who is someone I've had the pleasure of getting to work with through Operation Freelance and has such a unique story and an in-demand business and service that she offers. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for the audience?
Thank you, Laura. My name is Kelsey Notstad, and I am working as a freelance user experience consultant and user experience writer. I am also a military spouse. My husband and I are currently living overseas in Germany right now, and I'm spending my time here exploring Europe and getting in as much freelance work as I can.
I love that. There's so many different things that we can talk about here, but why don't we go to when you found out that the orders were going to take you to Germany? Were you in a career at that point in time? I mean, what sort of questions and concerns went through your head knowing that you were going to do an overseas tour, essentially?
Sure. So that was probably the most pivotal moment and change in my career. Leading up to that, I had been working for a few large corporations in South Dakota. I was working as a digital marketing specialist, a digital strategy program manager, kind of running everything digital in those corporations. And I was really committed to my work and finding my way up that corporate ladder. And my husband actually got orders to Germany while he was in Honduras on a remote tour. So it was just a lot of
that's a lot
information and life adjustments at once. And I knew I wouldn't be able to take that corporate job with me overseas. And so kind of naively, I was just like, I'm going to freelance and I'm going to do all the digital marketing things that I'm doing now. And it's definitely been a learning curve and a lot of growth over the last year and a half, but I'm making the most that I can out of the situation and learning from everything that I've experienced over the last year and a half and all the experience that I had in my job leading up to this point.
So what was the initial spark that made you think that freelancing might be a better fit rather than just, trying to find some job in Germany or trying to find a remote position that would allow you to work while you were in Germany? What sort of led you to freelancing as being a possibility for you?
Yeah, so I definitely tried to find a remote position that would work here.
Yeah.
But I know that people applying for remote jobs are in the hundreds and it's super competitive and hard to stand out. So freelancing is something that I think a lot of people in the creative field think about and wonder if that's something that they'd be able to do. And I've always thought that myself. And so I thought, what better opportunity than 3 years where employment opportunities seem limited than to really go all in and try and make the most of a freelance career.
That's really smart because I think you're right. A lot of tech and creative careers can be pivoted to freelance, and freelance can adjust to what you want it to look like. It can be part-time. It can be full-time. You really can decide how that's going to best work for you. What were some of the challenges you faced when you initially made this decision to freelance? Like how did you get started essentially, and what challenges did you face in doing that?
Oh my gosh, I have a laundry list of challenges that I faced. I'll try to keep it as positive as I can.
Right.
But for the first year that I was freelancing, I was just spinning my wheels. So as I mentioned, I worked in digital marketing, and in those roles, I did everything from social media and community management to email marketing and sales funnels to analytics and everything in between. And I wanted to I felt like I had worked hard to get to that point and to gain that skill set. And I wanted to take everything I was doing in those positions and translate them to a freelance career that was available to anyone, because I didn't want to close any opportunity doors. And it was just really impossible to market myself. I just felt like I was kind of shouting into the ether that I can do anything for anybody.
Right.
And it wasn't until actually I had seen a post in a Facebook group about a program that you were kicking off called Operation Freelance that I was able to really kind of chart a course for exactly what I wanted to do. And that kind of came at the exact right moment, because before that, I had been managing a client's social media for about a year, and I felt like that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I was having trouble navigating pitching and finding other clients. And so I was kind of at the point of wanting to give up, but then also knowing that my passions really lied in user experience. And I just couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap between where I was and what I was doing and where I wanted to go. And a whole year of challenges figuring that out. And Operation Freelance, I was accepted into the first cohort, and it literally changed my life. There's still been a lot of challenges in more so imposter syndrome and making sure that I am confident in what I'm doing. But it's not the same challenge as I had at the beginning, where I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I think your mindset when you started is where a lot of people are when they start a business, because you're thinking, well, I want to be someone that can do a lot of work for as broad a section of people as possible, which means you're a generalist. The problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily communicate to your ideal clients, because they think you're like a jack of all trades. And even though you might be, it's hard for them to feel like you're the right fit for them. And it feels like for you, narrowing in on, these are the things I'm an expert in. I do user experience work like on-sites, audits, I write about it, but choosing to focus on that made it really effective for your ideal clients to see you as the go-to person who does that thing. And I think a lot of new freelancers start off that way, kind of spinning their wheels. They'll make a massive list, especially virtual assistants, of like, these are the 600 services that I can do. And to a client, that's actually really overwhelming and kind of confusing. So the more that you can narrow in on what you want to do, I think that's helpful. And let's talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, because that's a problem for military spouses in a big way, whether it's a career or a business thing. I think that comes up a lot because you feel like you don't belong in a space, or you don't have enough experience, or sometimes it can even come up in the silliest of ways, like a client you have entrusts you to take on bigger responsibility or try something new with them. And it's because they're so excited about working with you, but you're like, I've actually never done that. I've never sold that. I'm new at this. I'm learning it. So that comes up a lot. And it can even show up when you're working with your everyday clients. Like, just all of a sudden you'll feel like, am I qualified to do this? Like, can you talk a little bit about how maybe that showed up for you and some of the challenges that you faced in working through that?
Certainly. So I would say imposter syndrome showed up for me before I even made that initial freelance offering pivot from digital marketing, anything you want, to really focusing on user experience, audits, and writing, because that was always an area of digital and content that interested me, but I didn't feel like I had the education or the long list of experience to open up that door for me. And so I felt like an imposter when all of a sudden I declared that I was a UX consultant. And I knew that I had the skill set to do what I wanted to do. And I saw that there were clients that were needing my services. And so I just kind of kept that in mind, in that I'm able to identify issues with websites, and I know that I can find that, and clients are asking for that. So I just kind of kept that really simple reminder top of mind. But when I don't receive feedback from a client, or initially I got a lot of really great feedback, and so that helped boost my confidence and keep me going. And now, probably because I'm doing these audits more frequently, it's just the percentages don't equal out that I'm receiving feedback on every single one like I had originally. Mm-hmm. And that's when those feelings kind of creep back in, and just have to remind myself that I have the skill set. I'm also going back to school. I'm getting my master's in human computer interaction. So I'm
that's awesome.
Really learning the details about every piece of this that are kind of reinforcing things that I'd learned on the job in the years prior. But sometimes I feel like you just need that little extra degree or certificate to show that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's kind of a holdover from the way things have been for a long time for business owners. You needed to have a certification or a degree. And in a lot of ways, freelancing looks different. I worked in a marketing associate role way back in the day for a year and a half, but I didn't study marketing or communication or any of that type of thing. All of it was experience gained on the job. And sometimes that imposter syndrome can show up in, well, do I really have the right experience? Do I have enough experience to really call myself an expert in this particular thing? I mean, I know what I'm doing, but what you don't know are all the things you don't know. So you're like, well, what is the skill set of another person who's doing UX work? Am I on the same level as them? Do I need to upskill or up level? And on getting feedback from clients, this just in general is one of the hardest things. And it shows up a lot for me when I publish a book. I will give people free copies of the book. I will send them PDFs. I will send them audio files of the audiobook. I will do anything, and they just won't review it. The number of people who follow through with the review, it is so frustrating sometimes because you need that feedback, right? You need the commentary. I know, especially on sites like Upwork, that feedback is a really important way for you to increase your credibility on the site itself, but it also gives you thumbs up that you are doing a good job. And so it is hard to get it. Sometimes with that, I will tell my clients what a big deal it is that I get feedback. Hey, if you have 2 minutes, because that's literally all it's going to take, can you please leave some feedback for me? I really want to know what your experience was like, because we're all still learning and growing, and there's probably things we could improve in our experience too. So I want to talk about freelancing is not for everybody. And that's one of the things we try to really get as best of a gauge as we can when we're looking at someone enrolling in the cohort of Operation Freelance, because people sometimes have this perspective of, well, it's super flexible. It can all be done online. This would be the perfect fit for me. You've worked in a more traditional career. Can you talk a little bit about how freelancing is different or the same as the kind of work you've done before?
Yes.
Awesome.
Think through, because it is entirely different from the work that I did before. Mm-hmm. But it's also that I'm learning skills that if I do decide to rejoin the traditional workforce, I know will make me just a much better employee and coworker. I think the biggest difference in freelancing versus working for a traditional job is, again, it kind of goes back to that imposter syndrome, just being really confident in the skills that you have and being able to deliver on those skills to clients who are trusting you. And that's something I don't take lightly when I'm hired to do a job and this client that works for, we are outside entities. I'm not employed by this company, and they're entrusting me to do work. And sometimes it's really important work, totally editing their website and figuring out why customers aren't converting. And sometimes I think when you're in a traditional job, there's a little bit more of a cushion for you to learn and mess up. And it's just kind of part of the growth. And I feel like as a freelancer, the growth happens exponentially because you're expected to know you're the expert. They're looking for outside help and they're hiring you.
I love that. That's such a great distinction because it's true. A client is hiring you and counting on you to know a lot of things. Whereas in a position, you can feel more comfortable saying, I actually don't know how to do that. I can learn that or I can try that, but I just want you to know that I'm still new to this. Whereas a freelance client is choosing you to work with them and probably above other freelancers too. And so they want to feel really confident in their decision. What was the hardest part of getting those first couple of clients? This is like the number one question I get all the time about freelancing. How do I get my first couple of clients? Do you have any lessons learned that you can share with other military spouses about getting over that hurdle, which I feel like is probably the biggest one for a new freelancer?
Definitely. So I will speak to Upwork because that's where I've had the most success in getting clients week after week. And the biggest hurdle to get over when getting clients through Upwork, from my perspective, is having testimonials from previous clients to help prove that you are who you say you are and that you're going to do a great job. Just like when you're purchasing things as a consumer, you generally look at the reviews. A lot of clients are going to look at that. So in order to just kind of get out of the gate with Upwork, and this was something I learned from you, Laura, looking for jobs that I can deliver on quickly and that maybe aren't quite up to par with what I expect to be doing long term, but just something to get under my belt and used to working with clients and then getting those reviews in place. And it was slow going. I mean, I think I sent over like 5 or 10 pitches before I heard back from an initial client. And that initial client that I interviewed with said straight out that she didn't want to work with me because there was no proof of the type of work I had done.
Right.
But then shortly thereafter, I got an invitation to interview for something that is like a dream job that I could have never imagined doing. So it's just kind of getting going and trusting the process, I think.
Yeah. And you brought up a really good point of that first client. It's so hard because it's a chicken or egg scenario. They don't want to hire you because you don't have any experience, but you don't have any experience because no one's given you a chance yet. And that's why I say it's the hardest thing to get. So one of the best things you can do is to invest as much time as possible in creating work samples, in coming up with things that can show what you do, even if it's like for your own website, right? Like I tell this to writers all the time. Write articles on your own blog, create blogs that would be samples for companies you'd like to work with. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Some clients are just going to go, well, you don't have any proof. You don't have any feedback. You don't have any references. You can't give me samples of any like published or finished projects you've done. But eventually someone is going to give you a chance if your work samples are solid. They will overlook that. And you got to remember, like every freelancer starts somewhere with 0 clients. Every single one of us had that experience of no one wants to hire me. I know it took me 36 pitches on Upwork to get my very first job. And like you said, it was a terrible job where I basically probably lost money on, it was like $150 to write like, I don't know, it was probably like a 10 or 20 page report. And at the time I was like, cool, this is amazing. And then afterwards I was like, oh, if I actually calculate how much time that took me to do, I made less than minimum wage, right? But you get that experience to break in. And then you can start to build your confidence and your work experience. So when it comes to interacting with clients, do you have any tips for other military spouses who are trying to decide if employment versus freelancing is right for them? What do they need to know about pitching and communicating to clients that might come as a surprise if you're new to this?
Ooh, that is a great question. I have found that when it comes to pitching with clients and communicating with clients, and honestly, I think that this is a good tip for the corporate world too, is to just be transparent and approach every new project, job, conversation from a genuine place of wanting to help. And then it feels a little bit less salesy and less pitchy. And so when I'm scrolling through Upwork and looking for jobs, it would just be like looking for a job on another website that posts traditional jobs. If there are things that they're looking for that they need help with or requirements for the role that I feel like define me, it's always coming from a genuine place of, yes, I can definitely help these people out. My pitches are always super straightforward and to the point, and I'm not trying to embellish myself or make myself sound like I'm something that I'm not. And my conversations, I just approach them less so as like a job interview and more so as just a really professional but comfortable conversation where I'm here to simply solve their problem, because this is a relationship that I'm going to be working with them. So we want it to be good, and I don't want to put myself on a pedestal or vice versa. And yeah, just coming at things from a comfortable, professional, genuine place has been helpful for me.
What you said there is a subtle but really, really important difference. I think a lot of new business owners dive into the mindset immediately of, I'm talking to a new client. I want to talk about selling them. I want to convert them. I want them to like sign the contract, to set up the job on Upwork, whatever it might be. You talked about solving their problem. And that is really where you want to be every time you talk to a client, because that is where they don't feel like they're being sold to. They feel that you care about their problem, that you have the skill sets to solve it, and that you're going to be the right person to work with them to create the best possible solution. So I know a lot of people get very nervous about doing phone calls, doing video interviews with clients. Approach it like you are looking to learn more about their problem and to see if you are the right person to help them solve it. It removes a lot of the pressure from the call of, okay, I really want this client to sign. I really need the money. I hope this is the client. I've pitched 55 times and don't have a client yet. Pull all that pressure off yourself, because that nervous energy can show up to the call. And when you approach it as genuine as possible, people just connect and relate to you in a different way. And sometimes I found if you can do that really well, you're not even the one bringing up the sale and the next steps. Like at the end of a really good call, some clients will just say, okay, I'm ready. What do I need to do now? What button do I push on Upwork to hire you? Can you send me your invoice and contract today? And that feels amazing as a business owner and freelancer, because you didn't have to convince them or pitch them or sell them. They are buying you essentially. They know you can do the job, but they want to work with you as a person. And that's just a really good feeling. So if you were going to go back in time and give advice to Kelsey when she very first started freelancing, what's one piece of advice that you would give to her today?
My advice would most definitely be to build a business that I am passionate about. And Kelsey, if you're not passionate about it, don't be afraid to start over. I feel like I learned that the hard way when I first launched my freelance business. I did it under a different name with a different branding and different service offerings, because I was trying to put together something that I viewed as the perfect digital marketing agency. But I hated every inch of it. The brand didn't inspire me and the work didn't fuel me. And I now feel like my business is a true representation of me, and I love it so much. And I never would have made it to this point if I had been afraid to pivot and focus on my true passions.
That is so important. You can always pivot. And this is one reason why I tell new freelancers, don't create a website. Like, don't invest hundreds or even thousands of dollars in a logo, branding, a website just yet, because you may have in your head, oh, this is what I really want to do. And then your first couple of clients are not a fit. And you're like, ooh, I actually don't want to brand myself in this way. I don't want to be a proofreader or a virtual assistant. I need to pivot and do something different entirely. And you don't want to have invested all that time and money and energy into creating something that doesn't feel you. And this happens a lot when we have past work experience that lines up with an easy freelance thing we could translate into. So you might be like, well, I worked in an office for 20 years, so therefore I should be a virtual assistant. If you hated working in the office for those 20 years, don't just pull over something you hated and do it virtually as a freelancer. Your point on passion is really well taken, because when you're passionate about what you do, it makes it easier for you to get up every single morning and do this work. It makes it easier to push through the obstacles, like when a project doesn't go as planned, or you lose that project that you thought was a sure thing, or you hit unexpected problems in working through something. But it also shows up for your clients. Your clients can tell when you are passionate about what you do. And it also makes you come across as more of an expert, because you authentically get excited about things. I have had calls or trainings where I was not even trying to sell the person on me. I was just trying to teach them like how to do Facebook ads or how to do Amazon ads. And in that process, they were like, oh my God, I don't want to learn this. You sound like you really care about it. Can I just hire you to do it? And it's because of that passion coming through, and because you love what you do and you're so good at it. I think that's why your clients just love working with you. Like, it's a no-brainer to hire you, because you're so genuine. You really care about what you're doing, And you obviously invest in your own skills too, right? Like you're learning new things all the time. You're watching the industry news on this. You've invested in your education to become even more of an expert. And all of those things are so key. Well, as we wrap up, I'd love to know if you would give a piece of advice to those military spouses that are listening out there that are kind of stuck on their career. It could be about just their career in general, or maybe they're trying to think about, is a traditional employee role, is that more suited to me than freelancing? Do you have any advice for someone who's kind of pondering those types of things?
Sure. My advice would be, if you are pondering a freelance career, to just go for it. The military throws us so many curveballs and we're all super agile because of it. And even if you're in a career right now that you feel like is really stable, I was there too. The military is going to move you more than likely. And so just do what's best for you and take that leap on your own before you're forced to do it, and give it 100% your best effort. I think a lot of times people, I was this way too, start freelancing and don't fully go all in right away. And that kind of leads to frustration and spinning wheels, but just give it 100% and go for it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to release this as one of our first couple episodes.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Our show is sponsored by Operation Freelance, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps military spouses, veterans, and caregivers break into freelance work. To learn more about that, visit www.operationfreelance.org. If you're looking to access show notes and more information about the guests you heard on today's show, please visit betterbizacademy.com.